Hi everyone, this is Nick Pollock here from Roar Lions Roar. While you're here, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that alert bell so you never miss any of our new content. And if you prefer to listen instead of watch, make sure you check us out on your podcast platform of choice where you can subscribe and download each new episode. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening. Go State!
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Roar Lions Roar. I'm your host, Bill DeFilippo, joined tonight by my co-host, Matt Filippovitz. Matt, anything you want to talk about, buddy?
Bill, I'm excited to talk about our featured game this week. I feel like the narrative around this game was, can a team, an organization that's really just been lacking the big quarterback travel across multiple time zones and get an impressive win? And I think was proven correct. Chicago Bears 35, Jacksonville Jaguars 16 in London. So I'm excited to talk about the mighty Chicago Bears.
I wasn't sure if you were going to do a Bears joke there or if you were going to make an Ohio State joke there, but I figured it was going one of those two possible directions. But unfortunately for Matt, we are not going to be talking about the Bears beating the Jacksonville Jaguars, and we're probably not going to talk too much about Ohio State losing to Oregon, but that might come up at one point or another because our primary focus today is going to be on Penn State. The Nittany Lions going to the Coliseum in Los Angeles and taking down USC 33-30 to move to 6-0 on the season. The Lions were down 20-6 at halftime, came roaring back in the second half, and then end up forcing overtime. And then Ryan Barker took care of things once we got into the extra period to give Penn State a win that, Matt, I'm going to be 100% honest with you. One of my big theories going into this game was that if Penn State lost it, we were going to end up seeing from a lot of different people, oh yeah, well, USC lost to Minnesota the week before. They're 3-3 now. They're 1-3 in conference play. You know, Miller Moss is not an NFL quarterback the way other Lincoln Riley quarterbacks have been. Their passing game isn't that, blah, 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 blah. And instead, I'll admit, I've been pleasantly surprised at how much of the aftermath of this game has been, boy, that's a really good football team that James Franklin has.
Yeah, this was a narrative shifter. Bill, I know you and I both had a lot of fun on Twitter, kind of taking a mini victory lap after seeing a lot of takes that were being prematurely had throughout the course of this game. Bill, this was the best win for Penn State of the decade. You think that's fair to say since the 2020s began? I think this is the best win.
I'm going to say no because I think winning the Rose Bowl is it's important.
Regular season.
It is a thing. Okay.
You can say it's Auburn 2022, but that wasn't a good game. This was the first time Penn State got punched in the face again, punched in the face a third time, and they found a way to rally back. Penn State teams in years past, I think, lose this game. One, because they're not talented enough. Two, because they're not resilient enough. And I got to give credit to James Franklin and that staff and Drew Allar and the leaders in that room for creating a culture that allowed Penn State to overcome the biggest deficit they've faced all season. So a lot of credit goes to Penn State. I think a lot of credit should go to USC as well. Lincoln Riley game planned a very, very good football game overall. Just the last minute and a half, I don't really understand what was going on there. But, Bill, overall, I could not be happier with how this game turned out. This was a win Penn State needed to have, and I didn't think they were going to get it. I picked them to lose, and I felt really good about my pick for a lot of this game. It's always weird when you feel good about a pick, but you feel terrible about the state of the game. It's always a fun back and forth. But Bill, this was a win they needed to have, and I'm could not be more impressed with this Penn State offense, especially.
So I'm interested in this question, Matt. When I look at this game and when I look at the mindsets that you and I had going into it, because they were, diametrically opposite mindsets going into this game, I'm interested in asking, when was the moment for you that you went, oh, okay, yeah, Penn State's going to end up winning this football game? Because bringing people into our Slack channels, like you weren't doing very well in the first half. You were having a pretty bad go of it in the first half. But I like at halftime though, I just had this feeling that this game wasn't as, winning wasn't as far out of reach as you might have thought.
Mm-hmm.
So when was the moment in your eyes, as someone who went into this game a little more wired to be negative about Penn State's chances, that you went, oh wait, yeah, I feel pretty good about this?
I didn't feel realistically good about this game until Jalen Reed's interception of Miller Moss with like 8 seconds to go. Like, I figured
Okay.
they got to overtime. Penn State's defense at that point had really settled in, but I was terrified, Bill, that USC had the ball last and they were going to get an opportunity to kick a field goal with a kicker who had been money throughout the course of the day so far. So I didn't feel, I felt good as the game went on. Like, you could definitely feel the tide turning. But again, on the road against a USC team that I think, I mean, your record says you are, but I think that team is better than 3-3. With all the travel part of it all, like, again, these are college kids. These aren't pros. Like, it's hard to do what that team just did. It's hard to win on the road. It's hard to win on the road in a 3-hour time difference after a full day of travel. Like, I really didn't feel good about Penn State's odds until fairly late in that game. And credit to Ryan Barker, because there's some serious stones on that kid.
So my thing was that when you looked at the first half of this game and you look at halftime specifically, 20-6 doesn't feel like an especially good scoreline. 20-6 feels like you're getting your asses kicked. That's also a 2-possession game. All Penn State needed from that point was to come out at the very start of the first half, of the second half, and score. And if they could score and then they could get the ball, they can get the ball back from USC relatively quickly. My confidence was going to shoot through the roof at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of this was because I thought Penn State was going to win going into the game, but the first 3-4 possessions of the second half, it's 20-6. Penn State comes out and just goes right down the field at the very beginning of the second half for a touchdown to make it 20-13. Next possession, USC comes out. They have to punt because Penn State's defense was just all over them. There was a holding penalty that ended up messing them up. Right after that, Penn State, again, gets the ball, marches 90 yards down the field for a touchdown. Drew Allar was out of his mind on this drive specifically. There's going to be a lot of talk about the throws that he made to Tyler Warren, obviously. The throw that he made to Amari Evans.
Oh, my God.
When get them down to USC's 3-yard line on this drive was, for me, his single best throw of the game. That wasn't him running around like a crazy person and getting it to Julian Fleming. And right there, all the work that USC had to do in the first half, where their defense is playing out of their minds, where they're keeping Penn State out of the end zone, where their offense is doing, look over here, we're going to do something over there, we're going to trick you over and over, take advantage of the fact that you're an ultra aggressive defense, take advantage of the fact that you're, some inexperienced guys on your defense, all these sorts of things. It all got erased right there, and we were at an even football game at 20-20 right there with 4.5 minutes left in the third quarter. And from that moment on, Matt, there was just something in me. I don't know what it is, because you're right. The criticism of James Franklin and the criticism of Penn State over the years is they always lose this kind of game. And I don't know what it is, but there was just something in me at that point where I saw all the work that USC did for 2.5 quarters get completely erased because we were at an even ball game. That made me go, yeah, I think Penn State's got this. Do you think that's an insane place to be with all of this because of how much happened after?
No, like, do I think I could have ever been as confident as you in that moment? No, absolutely not. And I think a lot of that was I have been the guy banging the drum that Drew Allar can be a day one prospect based upon his traits and that he is way better than people give him credit for. But I totally understand the perspective that Allar has never had everybody, pardon my language, get the fuck out of my way. I am going to lead this team to a win. We have never seen him do that before. I thought he could, but after a year and 5 games of seeing him play football, I needed to see it to think that was possible. If Penn State is in that scenario again, I feel like, Bill, I could now be where you were at yesterday. But, thinking back to myself 24 hours ago, I totally get where you're coming from, and I see how you got there feeling that confident. I just don't think, that version of myself could have ever, felt as confident.
Well, a lot of it for me, part of it came down to a big part of it came down to Drew, obviously, and we're going to end up talking about Drew Allar in a second. But one thing that I think, and is a thing that I will repeat throughout this podcast, particularly when we focus on Penn State's defense, was that Tom Allen has gotten a ton of shit from a lot of people for essentially the crime of not approaching defense the way that Manny Diaz did, even with the consideration that maybe the most important player on that defense, KJ Winston, is not there. In years past, what we have had as Penn State fans is a defense that is going to get after you, that is going to go for the jugular every single time. And in going for the jugular every single time, you are going to mess up enough because Penn State forces errors from you that you're just done. Tom Allen's defense doesn't work that way, Matt.
No.
And yet, in the second half, in the third quarter, USC ran the ball 5 times for 10 yards. They went 4 for 9 for 49 yards, 4.9 yards per attempt. In the fourth quarter, USC ran the ball 7 times for 35 yards, which is 5 yards per carry, but 26 of those came on their touchdown drive at the very beginning of their touchdown drive, and then 6 for 9 for 70 yards, 7.9 yards per attempt in the passing game. I don't want to blame this necessarily on travel or anything like that, because I do think that's a bit, I don't think travel was the reason why they struggled so much in the first half. It seemed to me early in the game that when you look at that little stretch between the drive where Penn State settles for a field goal and Drew throwing the interception, Penn State settles for a field goal because of an offensive pass interference penalty that takes a touchdown off.
The first drive of the game, right? Yeah.
Their first drive of the game. USC had the first drive of the game, 5 plays, 15 yards, they punt.
Yep.
Penn State marches right down the field, and because of an unsuccessful pick play that would have gotten Tyler Warren to walk into the end zone, and B, an offensive pass interference. It was a little ticky-tack. It's not like an all-time crime they called it, but it's also, if they didn't call it, nobody would have complained that much. They settle for 3. Right after that, USC throws a haymaker, takes advantage of some of Penn State's more aggressive tendencies, run for a long touchdown. Penn State punts right after that on a drive where, it was 4th and 3. It looked like they might have tried to go for it. They end up getting a false start, and they end up punting. USC comes down, marches right down the field, 14-3. That very next drive, basically Drew gets tricked into throwing an interception. In that stretch, USC ran 8 plays. Those 8 plays went for nearly 170 yards. Or a little more than 170 yards, 174 yards. It made sense why Penn State fans felt so bad in that moment. Mm-hmm. But from that point on, I think we saw Penn State as a team, after they went down 17-3 in particular. I know it ended up 16-3. It ended 20-6 at halftime, but from 17-3 on, after Drew throws that interception, and we get an example of why Drew throwing a pick isn't necessarily the end of the world, I thought Penn State settled into this game, used the rest of the first half to settle into the game, and then, of course, use the second half to come out like gangbusters.
Yeah, and let's talk about the Drew pick thing, first of all. It's very important, I think, that Drew, who has 3 interceptions to his career going into the game, is now leaving with 6 for his career. He doubled his career interceptions in this one game. One of them was on the Hail Mary, who cares? But for Drew to realize that, and I feel like after what Sean Clifford gave them back in 2022, where it was very turnover heavy, and frankly, turnovers are fine if you have the talent outside of it to make up for it, which Allar does. So I think it was a massive overcorrection by the coaching staff in 2023 to make him so incredibly turnover reverse. And I think this game kind of brings us back to equilibrium, where you can take those risky balls. If you see you have a shot, let's take the shot. If it gets picked off, that's fine. You're going to be a first round pick. You can make every throw under the sun to make up for it, and your defense is pretty good. That's a huge maturing moment that needed to happen. So I'm not happy that he threw 3 picks, but at the same time, I think those 3 picks are going to change the way Drew Allar handles his business moving forward. Because frankly, he's been very, very good outside of those. But sorry, Bill, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, like, all last year, a thing that I was screaming about was that the reward outweighs the risk if your offense is going to do really good things. If your quarterback just turns the ball over every now and then,
Mhm.
like it again, you don't want your quarterback turning the ball over. I'm not saying you like that Drew should just constantly put the ball in danger or anything like that. What I was saying and what I wanted, I think this game did a good job showing, was when Drew throws an interception, when there is a turnover, when something goes bad for the offense, you have to trust your defense that has in everyone's eyes taken a step back this year and is the number 5 defense of the country in defensive SP plus.
Yep.
You have to put your faith in them to be able to take care of business for you. And in this game, Drew throws a pick the very next drive for USC, 4 plays, -2 yards, field goal. USC took over at the Penn State 26 on that drive. A little bit later in the game, Drew throws a pick. This one I thought was much worse than the original one. Like the first pick that he threw, I thought USC's defense tricked him. He ends up trying to make a throw. They end up making a really good play, whatever. This one wasn't a very good throw. This is the first of the picks that Drew has thrown. This is the first one where, the Ole Miss one, I'm kind of, I don't even think it was as bad as I think this one was worse than that.
Mm-hmm.
This was the first one of the 6 that Drew has thrown, or 5 to that point, where I went, that was the bad throw. That was a bad decision by Drew, which is why part of the reason why I'm not too wound up about it, because that is uncharacteristic. That is not something I think he's going to do over and over again, and we have to be worried about. But after that one, ball on Penn State's 24, incomplete pass, run for 2 yards, incomplete pass, field goal. If there is one thing, Matt, I want to come from this game above everything else, it is that I feel like, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, I feel like there's a lot of scar tissue that Penn State fans have. And that scar tissue manifests in not having the requisite amount of faith in this team that is in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
And what I want Penn State fans to take from this game is that because something happened in 2021, because something happened in 2023, because something happened in 2018, yes, obviously we're going to be a little bit scarred by that, but don't let that stuff get in the way of enjoying what I think we can now safely say is a football team that, barring a catastrophic injury, has the potential to be not just special, but the best one that James Franklin has had in Happy Valley.
Yeah, I mean, listen, a lot of football to be played. There are 2 terrifying road trips in going to Wisconsin and going to Minnesota, and also, Ohio State. Like, there's still games on the schedule that should scare people, but this bye week could not come at a better time. Like, I was really nervous, Bill, that if Penn State lost this game, it would turn into the, lost bye week spiral that we've seen happen in the past, where you lose a tough one, you got to travel 1,000,000 miles back home, you got a week off to sit on it, then you go to a Wisconsin team that's finding its rhythm, and you got to play a night game, and then you host Ohio State. Like, I was terrified that it would have spiraled, and to Penn State's credit, they avoided that. That's growth by the coaching staff, and that's growth by this football team. So I think this is one of the best wins of the James Franklin era, like regular season or not. I could not be more excited for where this offense is going to head to. And for all the bemoaning about what Lincoln Riley is as a coach, like, listen, is he ever going to win a natty? Probably not. But like, you can say that about any coach. I would bet against any coach to not win a national title, who hasn't already done it. Like, it's really hard to break through that barrier. But Lincoln Riley can still call an offense. So to allow 30 points and only allow 10 in the second half and overtime tells me that this team can continue to figure things out. And I just hope that they can finally figure out how to start faster, because once this team puts together a complete game, we're going to see a shellacking of a team sooner or later.
So, this isn't on the little rundown that we have, but let's play a little game here, Matt.
Hit me.
You had your reason for why you thought Penn State was going to lose, and that ended up not happening. I had my reason for why Penn State was going to win, and that also ended up not happening. So if someone might have missed the most recent episode of the pod, can you explain, and I will do the same thing when it's, when I come up, what was the reason in looking at this game that you thought Penn State was going to lose, and why did that ultimately end up not happening?
I thought Penn State was going to lose this game for a lot of reasons, and none of them are frankly like what happens on the field. I think Penn State, I felt that going into this game, it was a very long road trip going to a USC team that is better than their record says. They have beaten a top 10 LSU team. They barely lost to Michigan in the Big House at 9 a.m. local time for USC. They barely lost to Minnesota. If you look at our friend Parker Fleming's Statso War on Twitter for that USC-Minnesota game, that Minnesota win over USC was the most unlikely outcome of the weekend. I thought that this USC team has enough firepower on offense with Miller Moss, especially, I think is a much better quarterback than he's getting credit for. He's just not a day one pick, but he's a damn good college quarterback. And I just felt like there were going to be enough plays against the Tom Allen defense that I think plays a lot of very soft zone. And I think USC has the athletes that we frankly haven't seen outside of that team that could take advantage of that extra space and go for big plays, especially with no KJ Winston. That didn't happen because Penn State's offense didn't let that break them. This is a much bigger deal for the offense than it is the Penn State defense. The Penn State defense still has a lot of growing up to do. They're still very distracted by eye candy. I think that's beyond fair to say after this game. But the Penn State offense came out there, played very disciplined football down the stretch. Tyler Warren, he's the first overall pick for a reason, played himself, I think, Bill, into fringe day one NFL draft status with this performance. And candidly, I really do feel like at the end of the day, USC kind of lost this game just as much as Penn State won it. But I'll take it. I really did think Penn State was going to lose for everything I just laid out. And again, I honestly don't know why it didn't happen. I just think that Penn State got very fortuitous and the offense played very disciplined football.
Yeah. I thought Penn State was going to win this game because I thought they were going to grind USC to dust.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that the way that both of these teams were built in the trenches just lended itself to Penn State being able to physically overpower USC, dominate the time of possession, run for 5-6 yards a pop, have Drew throw where he had, in spots where he had to throw, a game plan that comes off as very conservative, but is just leaning into the strength that you had. And that didn't happen in the slightest on either side of the football. I thought Penn State struggled to run the ball. I wouldn't be stunned if it comes out that Nick Singleton is still carrying whatever had him hobbled last week. Just wasn't as explosive, just wasn't as decisive as we've seen him be in the past. And I also wonder the same thing about Anthony Donko, who started at right tackle and played the majority of the game at right tackle. So I'm very interested in hearing about those two injuries, because those two injuries would lead to, it makes a lot of sense why Penn State, their most effective runner on the day was Drew Allar. Katron Allen, 16 carries, 56 yards, 3.5 yards per carry, long of 8. Nick Singleton, 10 for 26, long of 10. That would all make sense. On the other side of the football, I thought Lincoln Riley called a game that, one, really took advantage. I don't want to say took advantage, really lean into the fact that they just did not think Miller Moss was going to have time to throw. Mm-hmm. There were so many times where he was getting the snap and just getting the ball out, where it was, a screen pass going right at Abdul Carter, or a slant because there's just enough space there to be able to get that ball in there quickly. If you look at the stats, and I want to, credit to Sean Fitz over at On3, I'm not going to read them off. You should subscribe to everything that they do and read them over there. When Moss had to throw the ball down the field, it was a disaster for us.
100%.
They could not do that to save their lives, in part because part of the way they were slowing down Penn State's pass rush was they were giving their tackles help, usually in a way that didn't let them have guys get out past, too far terribly, only have 3 guys running routes or something like that. You then look at how they ran the ball. Woody Marks in particular had a fantastic football game, consistently getting 5, 6, 7 yards a pop until Penn State's defense really settled in. Again, that eye candy, that getting, we're going to do something here, make you go here, and then we're actually going to go that way, was something that really worked for USC in this football game. And I think that once Penn State settled in, once they, I pointed to the drive where they held them to a field goal after Drew threw the pick as when I think they started to settle in. You look at all of that, and I think things maybe started to change for them, but for the most of the game, USC, I thought, approached it acting like around. We'll do the Penn State's defense first, then Penn State's offense after that. I thought USC's offense approached this game in such a way that was so dependent on smoke and mirrors, on taking advantage of what Penn State wasn't particularly good at, all these, or what Penn State was potentially vulnerable to, that once Penn State got into the locker room at halftime, it does not surprise me that they settled in, they were able to tweak some stuff, they were able to catch to their breath, and they were able to impose themselves a little bit more as the game went on.
And impose yourself is a good way to put it, Bill. Drew Allar wasn't sacked a single time in this game. Like, I get USC's big thing is not getting pressure on the quarterback, and I get they were missing their best linebacker, and a lot of people on that defense have either opted to redshirt or are out. But for Allar to be able to be as comfortable as he was in that pocket, allow him to keep his eyes downfield, allow him to understand when it's time to scramble, is a ringing endorsement of what that Penn State offensive line did. And I don't want to lose focus of that in a game where everybody's going to be talking about Drew Allar and Tyler Warren. The Penn State offensive line, the one criticism I would have would be on the last second Hail Mary, where it's a 3-man rush and Anthony Donko's guy just flat out beats him on the edge in a one-on-one situation. Like, maybe he's still dinged up, who knows? That was like the one criticism I would have. But when it came to pass blocking, this team really did a great job of keeping Drew Allar upright. And it really, like, they did not, USC's defense did not look like it had any shot to get any kind of pressure. So that kind of physicality will go a long way moving forward. Yeah.
And funny enough, there was really the one play where I thought they really let Drew down with their pass blocking was the second fourth down conversion where Julian Fleming caught the ball. Just like, what the hell, man? Like, again, that is why you put up with the way Drew struggled last season in big games, because it was about finding that guy and getting him to this point. But we'll talk about the offense in a second. I want to talk about Penn State's defense, because I do think this is a little bit easier of a conversation, Matt, or a quicker conversation to have.
Yeah.
Yes, not particularly great during, they allowed 3 straight scoring drives, one of which comes on the heels of the interception in the first half. After that, so USC starts punt, touchdown, field goal. After that, a punt, a field goal, go into halftime. A punt, a field goal after an interception, their 1 touchdown drive of the second half, an interception to end a drive, and then the missed field goal in overtime where they got -3 yards on that drive.
Shout out to Dennis Sutton for that play, man.
Yes. I mean, they left him unblocked and he just exploded into the backfield. I thought the defense's issue, again, it was a matter of USC spent a lot of time in the lab figuring out where Penn State is going to, you jingle the keys over here and then you do something over here. It's the cup and balls trip. in Magic where you are not paying attention to the thing you're supposed to pay attention. You should pay attention to. If you do that, you will then see what they're doing. But because you don't, it then becomes easier to put things here, there, and everywhere. I thought once they kind of caught their breath, once they got a second to compose themselves, and once they stopped falling for, hey, look over here. All right, we're going to go that way. It became a really good performance by Penn State's defense.
Pursuit angles was my biggest criticism. I get that USC's whole thing is that they are going to get their athletes in space, and it is very hard to judge that angle from there. But I think that was my biggest criticism. Again, credit to Lincoln Riley. The game plan was very similar to Bowling Green. Let's get the ball out quick. There's going to be about 4 yards of cushion a lot of the time, and Miller Moss was correct in his read every single time, it felt like. And that's just good coaching. So credit to Miller Moss. That's good quarterback play. The Penn State defensive front, I think, handled Woody Marks as best as you can ask for, considering the kind of game he played. When there is this inherent fear of the big play by nature of who USC has on their sideline and has who they have in their receiving core, you are going to have to play a little bit soft and give up a little bit of space up front. Credit to USC's offensive line. They cleared enough running lanes. But again, Penn State never got gashed for the big one by USC starting running back. Like, if it takes him 20 carries to get to, what do you have, 116 yards, I want to say, that's fine by me, because that tells me that you're controlling the flow of how they're running the football. What was Woody Marks' longest run? Now that I look at it, let me look it up in real time.
28 yards.
So you get one big one out of there, which I think happened on a USC touchdown drive. Their final touchdown drive of the game, I want to say that one happened on. And that was just, I just felt like they were gassed after that by watching that, in live. So the Penn State defense, I think, is a continuing work in progress. Again, I felt like there was going to be a regression after Manny trotted out the best Penn State defense of my lifetime last year. And I think Tom Allen is really, it's hard because I think it's going to be really hard for him to kind of shake this perception. I think a lot of people, maybe even myself included, have of him, where that the way they play in the first half is going to come back to bite them sooner or later. But until it happens, I'm just going to have to trust Tom Allen and that coaching staff that they're going to be able to find a way to beat the good teams on their schedule.
Yeah, USC had 409 yards on the day. They had 164 of those yards on their 2 touchdown drives in the first half. Obviously, one was just one big play that they were able to break, and then a 7-play, 89-yard drive. Outside of those 2 drives, USC had 245 yards of total offense on the day. And obviously, if you're pulling this out, it's obviously going to look worse, blah, blah, blah. I think that those 2 touchdown drives set a tone for Penn State specifically, or basically forced Penn State to kind of get its act together in a way that we didn't see coming, because we kind of expected that Penn State was just going to shove them around in the trenches all game and things would not necessarily be easy for them, but they would be able to physically impose themselves in this football game. Ultimately, USC went all in on making sure that couldn't happen. And credit to them, it worked for a while. But getting back to something I said at the very beginning of the podcast, Matt, it didn't take long for Penn State in the second half to be able to make all that work go out the window. And I think when you then look at what happened in the second half in particular, 5 plays for 27 yards, 6 plays for 15 yards, 4 plays for 2 yards, 9 plays for 75 yards, 7 plays for 30 yards. It seems pretty evident to me that things became less easy for USC in the second half of this football game, because I just don't think for an entire game, unless you are a service academy and this is what you have to work on, you can just smoke and mirrors your way to win in a football game. And I think you have to give a lot of credit to Penn State's front seven, which stopped getting themselves into bad positions so USC could take advantage of this and this and this. But also, I thought Penn State's defensive backs played a very good game, particularly when it came to, we're going to put you in a situation where it's you and the guy. You either tackle the guy or we're getting a big gain out of it. And I thought the way that Penn State tackled, particularly in the second half, was really great. Was there anything about Penn State's defense from the first half to the second, just in general, whatever, that you want to a specific player, whatever it might be, that you want to highlight because you thought the way that they went about their business or the way that they flipped the switch from the first to the second half was particularly impressive?
Jalen Reed. Bill,
Okay.
while we were recording, the team released their players of the game. I think you could probably guess who they were for offense. I think you can probably guess who it is for defense, and I guarantee you can guess who it is for special teams. It was Allar and Warren offensively, Jay Reed defensively, and then Ryan Barker, ice in his veins for special teams. Jalen Reed. You look at the top 4 tacklers for Penn State, and I think it's like the 4 big dogs of this pack. It's Kobe King at the top, Jalen Reed, Abdul Carter, Deni Dennis Sutton. With KJ Winston out, I think those 4 are the most important players on the Penn State defense. That doesn't feel controversial to say at all. So to watch Jalen Reed, who is now finally able to play back in that Lion position, thanks to the arrival of Zion Tracy specifically, who I thought had a very, very decent game. And also shout out to him. Really good job fielding those punts. No fumbles.
Mhm.
He's an absolute maniac for trying to return that one with a guy in his mitt, but I kind of like that mentality. And I want to make sure I call that out before I forget. But Jay Reed, there was like a 3rd and 8, I want to say, and Reed has to go out there. It's really him one-on-one against some receiver. And Reed does go a little high, but he's a good enough and strong enough player to bring him down and force a punt. It's those kind of plays that win football games. It's that kind of sure tackling, those fundamentals that Penn State not lacked in the past, but didn't have enough guys on the roster able to consistently play that way. That hurt them and led to losses in games like this. So for Jalen Reed to go out there and play another phenomenal game, I still think he is maybe one of the more underrated players in the Big Ten. And I just want to make sure Jalen Reed gets his flowers. Also, his blitzing ability, which led to, I think, USC's only holding call of the day, was just a phenomenal job by him to be a much slower offensive tackle off the edge. And he didn't really even have to sell it at all. Like, it was obvious to everybody in that building that Jay Reed got held. So I just want to make sure he gets his flowers, because what he does, even if it doesn't show up in the box score, is indispensable for this Penn State defense.
Yeah, I mean, he's having a guy like that at the back, and we saw on the pick, like, I thought there was a really good example of a guy like getting rewarded for his day. You know, they're the people who always say like the ball finds you, and so like that. You know, ball don't. I know it's not for this particular reason, but ball don't lie. The ball found a way to get into Jalen Reed's hands on a day where he deserved to make that kind of a play. My only regret is that it didn't happen with like 30 more seconds on the clock, because Penn State would have won it in regulation at that point. But Lincoln Riley wasn't having that for some reason. Yeah, I want to give credit to him, and I want to give credit to basically the entire defensive backfield. Guys like Zion Tracy, guys like Elliott Washington, the younger dudes. You know, we know that AJ Harris is really good. Jalen Kimber ended up having his best game as a Nittany Lion, I thought, but we know he's an established guy. I thought the young guys in Penn State's defensive backfield, there was a lot asked of them in this game, in part because if you just roll the same guys out over and over and over again against USC, you're going to get cooked eventually. So you had to get Zion Tracy some time in the field. You had to get Elliott Washington some time in the field.
Real quick, when did he change his number?
Guys,
he was 16 the entire time. He changed to 9 all of a sudden pregame?
Why not? But yeah, I think when you have a defense that, again, there is a lot of trust that this defense needs to earn from Penn State fans because of how they play, because of, a lot of people have just carried over the Bowling Green game because of how they're not as aggressive and ruthless as past Penn State defenses. That stuff is still going to kind of linger for Penn State fans. But I think this game was a really good example of, if you have faith in what this group can do, if you have faith in the talent on this group and the coaching staff, all these sorts of things, it will pay off. This isn't a Penn State defense that is going to play a high-profile game and allow 250 yards of total defense with 5 sacks and 2 picks and a fumble recovery. But this is a Penn State defense that could still win them a football game, and I think we saw that on Saturday.
One last guy, Bill, in the secondary I want to call out, because you read off all those names, and to take a page out of James Franklin's notebook, I want to make sure no one feels left out. Cam Miller, a guy who was not, a starter. He plays starter level reps, but he's not a starter in name a lot of the time. He finished the game with 1 tackle and 1 pass breakup, which happened in overtime, where maybe he got there early, maybe he didn't. They didn't call it. Good play by Cam Miller in a one-on-one coverage against a talented USC passing attack to go out there and knock the ball away. And I want to make sure we give credit there.
Yeah, we can go up and down this defense and shout guys out, but we'll say that for the end of the pod. Before we do that, though, before we talk about the offense, I want to talk about our friends over at Home Field Apparel. Home Field Apparel, been our podcast sponsor since we went podcast only a few years ago, and they've been great. I mean, I'm not wearing home field gear right now, but every Friday I'm throwing on something from Home Field Apparel for Penn State football Saturday. Ahead of Penn State football Saturdays. On Saturday, I'm wearing something from Home Field Apparel. Usually on Sunday, I'm wearing another thing from Home Field Apparel, because Home Field Apparel makes the best stuff in the collegiate apparel game that you can get your hands on. The designs that they have don't look like anything else that you are going to have that you are going to find anywhere else on the market. The material they use is really great. Like, everything about Home Field Apparel, even if they did not sponsor our podcast, I would love everything that they do, whether it's for Penn State or whether it is for another school. And no matter what you would want to add to your wardrobe, whether it's t-shirts, whether it's hoodies, whether it's crew necks, whether it's joggers, whether it's bomber jackets, whatever it might be, Home Field Apparel has something for you. And I'm going, again, even if they weren't sponsoring us, I would highly recommend that you get your hands on stuff from Home Field Apparel. And if you want to get your hands on stuff from Home Field Apparel and you've never purchased from them before, you can use the promo code RLR23 to get 15% off of your first order. Again, RLR24. Oh no, RLR24. Yes, that one. Wow, my brain is short-circuiting. Promo code RLR24 to get 15% off of your first order from Home Field Apparel. You should take advantage of it. Thank you to Home Field Apparel for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Matt, let's go back to talking about Penn State's offense.
Oh, baby, let's do it.
33 points, 518 yards of total offense, had 12 more first downs, converted twice on 4th down, 9.1 yards per pass attempt. Again, they won this game in a way that I didn't think they were going to be capable of winning this game. And as a result, incredibly impressive performance by the Nittany Lion offense.
Bill, 6 games in, many folks would say that's the halfway mark. Bill, what is Drew Allar's yards per attempt so far?
I would guess he's at about 10.4.
10.1. Significant 10.1. To some. Significant to some. You and I both took the under in that. I cannot believe that's held up over the years.
What did you put the over-under at?
10.
10, okay.
Mm-hmm. Which we both felt was insane. That was the one you was like, that's my insane one for the year. And we're trending there. Yeah. A long way to go. Man, Bill, I can't believe they won a game that way. Drew Allar threw the ball 43 times. 3 of those were intercepted. Every other ball had a purpose, was delivered, I think, pretty well. Some of them were dropped, to put it bluntly. Overall, Bill, we watched the former 5-star, the guy who a lot of people, myself included, thought was going to be the missing link to get Penn State over that hump, do the thing, win the game, figure it out, make the throws. Those 2 4th down throws, first of all, credit to Julian Fleming, a 5th-year guy who did not register a catch the entire game, to remain engaged and make 2 of the biggest plays of the Penn State football season, deserves a lot of praise. That's a culture guy.
Well, if I can interrupt you for a second, it wasn't just that he didn't catch any balls up to that point. He also was responsible for a touchdown being taken off the board. He also, I think, had 2 drops, 1 or 2 drops earlier in the game before that. He did what he does as a run blocker. He ran his route. He did a lot of stuff. But when Julian Fleming had to do things before that final drive, when it was like, Julian, this is your time, he didn't do them correctly. He did a bad job. And then he completely redeemed himself.
Which is, you want to root for that kind of kid, man. You know, what more can I say about Tyler Warren that I haven't said on this podcast? An absolute revelation. I think this performance puts him past Gesicki and Freiermuth for the best tight end of the James Franklin era. I don't think anybody can debate that at this point. Tyler Warren is special. We are watching something special. That was Saquon, Iowa 2017. That's what that was. What we just saw out of Tyler Warren. But there's other pieces here that specifically on those final true drives for Penn State that I want to make sure get called out. And it's Trey Wallace for making two very good catches, one in between two defenders and one on a 10-yard slant where he has the corner in the tickle chamber. He fakes like he's going to go far, cuts inside on the slant. Absolutely easy money. Great job by Trey Wallace. And then Julian Fleming to make those two catches. When everybody in the building thinks you're going to send the ball to Tyler Warren, and I think, honestly, that would have been a smart idea no matter what. And it probably was the first read, especially on the second Julian Fleming fourth down conversion, to watch other guys work to space, make good catches, and redeem themselves for their drops is what you want to see. This Penn State passing attack is going to be tight end driven no matter what. But now, every single defensive coordinator is going to go out there and double team 44. Like, you'd be smart to do it. And I think that's going to open up opportunities for these other receivers. They answered the bell when those opportunities came up on Saturday. And I really do hope that we're seeing that start to become unlocked moving forward. So I mean, Allar did just such a good job. I'm seeing some criticism that all he did was throw the ball to Tyler Warren. If your, narrative after this game is that you're a Tyler Warren merchant, own it. Tyler Warren's the best player on the football field 9 times out of 10. He did a great job. Allar played a phenomenal game. Allar, I think, worked himself on the national scale now as the kind of guy who's going to go in day one of the NFL draft.
Well, we'll see on that one. But I'm glad you mentioned the Iowa game in 2017 because I thought this game had a lot of there were a lot of ways where this game mirrored that game in my eyes. You had the individual performance by Tyler Warren that was Saquon-esque, but Penn State getting deep into opposing territory and having to settle for field goals. Penn State needing to convert fourth downs on a final drive that, needing to convert fourth downs on a final drive to get the points that they needed to ultimately win in the game. Obviously, the order of operations is a little bit different on that one. Just all these just a couple of things that in the aftermath of the game made me go, you know what? I don't think this is too terribly unlike what we saw when Penn State played Iowa. Obviously, that game was a lot more low scoring, but there were a lot of ways where I thought this game, it just kind of hit on a lot of those similar notes. A tough road game against a team that plays such a unique way. You have to kind of dig deep and find a way to win that football game. And the big reason why they were able to find a way to win that football game was because of Drew. I mean, for all the attention that's going to be on Tyler Warren, all of it is deserved. He needs to he's going to get us fired. I think Gary Danielson, either him or Brad Netzler, had a great line during the game where it was like, so yeah, I have one question after this, and that's who are you putting second on your Mackey Award ballot? And it was like, yeah, no, that's a really good line. And he deserves all the credit. The way that Penn State uses him, you could tell that he is such a focal point of the offense with stuff like, we're going to put even something as simple as you run a QB sneak with him. Obviously, all the attention is going to be on him throwing the ball to Katron Allen.
Nice ball, though. Give him credit. That's a good ball.
He did a nice job there, for a high school quarterback. Or the play where he lines up at center and then goes down the field and losses a guy while getting interfered with for a touchdown. Like,
unreal.
Those are the things. Yeah, like that stuff is what you end up remembering as like the splash plays. But even as something as simple as we need to get a yard or we need to get 2 yards, what are we doing here? We're going to have Tyler just put his head down and get it. They consistently went to that over and over again, whether it was for that whether it was for his one rush of the game, whether it was when they were just feeding him. But the thing is, this game right here shows exactly why you put up with Drew Allar leading Penn State into Columbus, Ohio, and having a shocker, or why you put up with Drew Allar going up against Michigan and throwing for 70 yards and looking like he was just a shell of himself. You go through games like that. You go through games where he struggles. You go through games where he doesn't know what he's doing, because at some point, a guy this talented, a guy this driven, a guy who is this committed to being as good of a quarterback as he can be, stuff is going to start happening in his brain that leads to his God-given abilities being able to be put on display in a way that we just don't normally see them consistently. Drew always had the talent to do things for one play, for 3 plays, for this. The great one, those are the guys who get to play quarterback in college football.
Yes.
The great ones are the ones who go 10 plays, 15 plays, 20 plays, where they're in total control of everything, where they, you point to the interceptions as mistakes. The more consistent mistakes are, you don't know who you think you're supposed to throw to that guy. You don't see someone there, it gets knocked down, or you don't get your feet right and you airmail it. It's those sorts of things that add up over the course of a game that are not as individually destructive as turnovers, but over the course of an entire game, you do that 15, 20 times and you're going, 8 for 20 in a game. You're going 11 for 30 in a game. You're throwing for, 5.5 yards per attempt. And Drew has gotten that stuff out of his game. This was against a defense that was trying to take away the big stuff. They did that to varying degrees of success. I didn't think any one Penn State wide receiver had a great game, but in the aggregate, Penn State's wide receivers, 9 catches for 128 yards. If Drew Allar completed passes to 3 guys all game, Tyler Warren for what he did, running backs on dump offs, and then 1 wide receiver who went 9 for 128, we are feeling great.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, we are feeling unbelievably good about the wide receiver room because they have that guy in it. Instead, they have the alpha dog in Tyler Warren and then guys to spread the football out to. And when you have that, and when you have a quarterback and you have running backs who are really good, weren't really able to impose themselves again. I think Nick Singleton is probably still playing through something, just how he looked. It was proof of concept for why you get the 5-star, why you let him screw up over and over, why you hire the offensive coordinator with getting the most out of that specific guy in mind. And when you put that all together, you were able to have a performance like this, Matt.
This is why you put up with Andy Kotelnicki too. Like, I know there's a lot of consternation surrounding when he runs certain packages. What does the Bo package really do? I'm never going to question the guy ever again. This is what he came here to do. The Bo package, first of all, coming out with the Bo package, the very first play of overtime, is absolutely hilarious. That absolutely sent me. With Drew throwing for almost 400 yards, you're trotting Bo back out there. I thought that was so funny. He's thinking 3 steps ahead, and that's what he gets paid a lot of money to do. And I want to make sure that I'm always conscious of that. And as long as 44 stays healthy, listen, can you give him 17 catches week in and week out? No, I think this is a very good plan to do with him against that defense and with a bye week on the other side of this thing. Get that dude in the ice bath immediately. But Andy Kotelnicki is going to find a way to get the most out of the players on this roster. And that's a rarity, I think, for a lot of college offensive coordinators.
Yeah, and I actually want to read from a quote from Allar after the game that I think gets to that pretty well. This from, again, Drew Allar after the game. We talked about emptying the clip for us as an offense. We want to play to win and not play scared and not play to not lose. That was one of those calls that we needed to get in to show that we're fearless out there with Coach K. That's why we've had so much growth on offense this year, I think. Coach K is fearless, and he's going to call those plays no matter what. The whole second half, we let it loose. And Matt, that is such a radical departure from what we saw last year in approach on offense and Drew's approach specifically, that it's like incredibly refreshing. But two, when you hear Drew Allar say that, all of a sudden, it's almost like, why were we ever worried that Penn State was going to lose this game? When that is the mentality that this team is going into the second half of a game that it is losing with.
The mentality thing, I think a team, and especially regarding coordinators, takes on the identity of its coordinators. Like, especially for a guy like James Franklin, who I think is more of like the big picture handler kind of guy, and how important I think position coaches and coordinators are. You take on the identity of your coordinator. And I think Andy Kotelnicki's identity is, let's have fun. Let's find a way to make things weird. Like, we're playing backyard football. The Tyler Warren touchdown where he snaps the ball is backyard football at its finest. And I really do believe that it's game 6. The bye week's here. This is about the time where the Joe Moorhead offense really started to click. I think there's a level here. And once Penn State gets a game where the running game and the passing game clicks all together, again, it's going to be gangbusters on some poor opponent sooner or later.
Purdue. It's going to be Purdue. I am telling you right now, the Penn State is going to do that against Purdue.
Probably.
Yeah, I'm looking at my notes for any final things that I jotted down. There's nothing to me that I wanted to address with the offense or the defense that we haven't already touched on, Matt. Anything for you, or do you want us to go right to game balls?
One more, I always want to make sure I call out specific players. One guy I want to call out on offense is Nick Dawkins, because again, the leader of that unit, I was concerned that he was not going to be up to snuff in year 5 with his first chance to start. And I am so happy that Nick Dawkins is a reliable part of this offensive line. And he did a phenomenal job, again, keeping Drew Allar upright. The running lanes just weren't there by nature of how this game played out, but it was to no fault of that Penn State front. And as the leader of that, Nick Dawkins, I think, deserves his flowers.
And there are two Drew plays I want to highlight that had absolutely nothing to do with his ability to be good at playing quarterback. And it was both of the times that James Franklin called a timeout because something wasn't right. The first one was when Drew was split out at wide receiver, and Nessler and Danielson were all over this and having a goddamn blast with it. But Drew was split out at wide receiver, and he's like directing traffic from wide receiver because guys didn't know where to stand, and you could just tell that he was like completely pissed off at everyone and everything. And then there was the one, I think it was in the second half. It was either in the second quarter. Yeah, I think it was in the second quarter, actually, where like the snap didn't get off in time or wasn't going to get off, or like Franklin thought the snap wasn't going to get up off in time. So Drew is just like jumping up and down in the backfield. You mentioning Nick Dawkins is actually what reminded me I wanted to say this. And it was like pissed at Nick Dawkins or whatever for not like getting everything right. And Franklin took a timeout. And it's like, this is not the guy that, and I think that quote that he gave about Andy Kotelnicki is a really good example of this. This is not the guy we saw last year. Like, I thought coming into this season, Drew said the word confident 10 times minimum in every single public appearance where he spoke to the press. He talked about his own confidence. He talked about his confidence in the offense. He talked about confidence. And it always came off to me like he was a guy trying to convince himself to be confident because he couldn't wrap his head around that. And in retrospect, what has happened is that wasn't a guy talking himself into anything. That was a guy making a statement about what's going to happen. And we are now seeing the fruits of that in his play, in how demonstrative that he's being, in the leadership that he is taking on offense, in the confidence that he has in himself and his guys around him, in his willingness to get into it, not in a way that is like harmful, I don't think, but his willingness to get into it with opposing players, with his own guys in a I'm holding you accountable way, and his willingness to like yell at the sideline because he sees something or this or this or this. Like, this is the guy that we wanted to see. And it's understandable why we didn't see him at first, but now we're seeing him now. It's a joy. And he obviously, going to game balls, he obviously gets one of my two offensive one. The other one obviously goes to top four. I assume you're saying the exact same thing, Matt.
Yes, sir. What more can I say about those two?
I don't know. Warren said, what did he tie the FBS record for receptions in a game by a tight end, and is like second in program history in a single game with 224 yards total. Just ridiculous. Defense, who are you going to give it to?
I thought about going with Jay Reed a lot of the time, and I think I have to stick with it. What he gave that defense, getting the interception was like that's like the splashiest play, but I think that was probably the most inconsequential, quote unquote, splash play he made. His sure tackling, his ability to play in coverage, and his blitzing ability, the holding call, I think really mattered more in the flow of the game. And Jalen Reed, somewhere how the program gave him the game ball, he gets my game ball for defense.
I'm going to go with Denia Dennis-Sutton and Abdul Carter, and here's why. I thought they played nice games. 6 tackles, 2 tackles for loss for Denia Dennis-Sutton, 5 tackles, 1 sack, 1.5 tackles for loss, and a pass deflection for Abdul Carter. But the reason that I'm going with them,
I forgot about the pass deflection for Carter. That could have been a pick. That would have been game, set, match in regulation. Oh, I forgot about that. Sorry, Bill. When you said it, I'm like, when did he deflect the pass? And then I remembered it's when he dropped in coverage.
Yeah. It's they always say there's a reason that cornerbacks are not wide receivers. There is a reason that Abdul Carter doesn't play offense. But the thing for me is that USC very clearly built their entire game plan around those two guys specifically. They were willing to sacrifice having guys running routes. They were willing to sacrifice doing anything mostly doing anything other than trying to dink and dunk their way down the field, because they knew if Denia Dennis-Sutton and Abdul Carter had a chance to really pin their ears back, it was game, set, match. And I think that mixed with the fact that, Carter had that pass deflection, they combined for 3.5 tackles for loss. Carter got the game's only sack. I think when you put those things together, you give them their flowers, and you say that even though, Jalen Reed had, played a really good game, he had the interception, all that, for 60 minutes and 1 period of overtime, USC's offense approached this game going, we cannot let Denia Dennis-Sutton and Abdul Carter beat us, and Penn State won that football game. So you have to give it to them. And then, Matt, I will let you give the final one out that has to be given out.
The miscellaneous one. Ryan Barker, dude. So happy for that. Also, shout out Gabe Wosu. Pretty good job on kickoffs. There was one that almost went out of bounds, but close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. That was a very good kick to keep it away from Zachariah Branch.
And it's worth mentioning, Branch returned 2 kicks. He returned one for 16 yards and the other for 13 yards. So the special teams unit did an excellent job getting down the field on kickoffs.
Dakari Nelson especially had one of the tackles on that. And I know I think special teams captain this week. So shout out to Dakari Nelson. Great play by him.
Yeah, and Riley Thompson punted twice, and they didn't get it. They fair caught both of those. So Penn State's coverage teams had a really excellent day, making sure that a potentially dangerous special teams unit didn't do anything to them.
But Ryan Barker, it's his moment. I cannot wait for when they announce the starting lineups in Beaver Stadium against Ohio State in a couple of weeks, and when they go the kicker and it's Ryan Barker, to hear the reaction from that crowd, because it should be the loudest of anybody who gets announced as a starter. And
Matt, they play another football game between now and then.
Well, not in Beaver Stadium though.
No, I know. But what if he goes 1 for 3 and they lose to Wisconsin because he couldn't
get that out of my head. I mean? Yeah, fair enough. I don't want to jinx the kid. Just good for Ryan Barker. Like in this moment, like for a walk-on from the state of Pennsylvania, his post-game interview makes me think he's an absolute maniac. Where they asked him, what he was going through his head when he was making the kick, and his response was, "How I'm going to celebrate with my teammates." Absolutely insane stuff. Really, really happy for the kid. Great job by Tyler Duzansky and Riley Thompson on the other two parts that go into a game-winning field goal. And I could not be more excited and more optimistic about the state of the Penn State kicker moving forward, with him only being a redshirt freshman eligibility-wise.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning that Sanders Sahaydak didn't make the trip with them to Los Angeles. He wasn't on the travel roster. And coaches are inherently conservative. Coaches are inherently going to go with what they know in most situations. And it's a really big tell how much confidence they had in Ryan Barker's ability to get the job done, that they didn't go into this game thinking, well, we have to make sure Sander comes with us, because if Ryan messes up once, we have to hook him and put the guy who's been this. Even if he hasn't done it well, he at least knows what the situation is like, knows what that moment is like. And it says a lot about Ryan Barker that he was able, they didn't think that they needed to bring Sanders Sahaydak as like a net to catch if, he missed a PAT and a field goal or something like that. And I almost wonder if that instilled a little bit more confidence in Ryan Barker, knowing that, like, brother, this is your time. This is your job. Go out there and make it happen. We believe you will. I had that point when they hooked Sander a few weeks ago, where I basically said, like, listen, we got really lucky with Alex Felkins. Don't just assume that Ryan Barker is going to be better. And, still a long way to go, still a lot of football to go, but that was as good of a performance as we could have seen out of him. Winning Penn State the game, Franklin, getting caught with a hot mic saying how much he's proud of him. All these sorts of that, like, just unbelievable for Penn State.
Yeah.
Hell of a win.
What
Matt.
a Saturday.
Any final thing? Yeah. I'm before we go, I want to make sure I read a quote that Franklin said, because this goes back to something I mentioned about scar tissue, about fear, about not believing in Penn State football, not believing in the players, not believing in the coaches, whatever, or like guarding yourself against the worst. Here's a quote that Franklin gave that I think is really important to hammer home. You're going to have to find different ways throughout a season to win. Some are going to be blowouts. Hopefully more of them are blowouts, but some of them are going to be comebacks. And the word resilient is probably the best word to define our team. And I say that to say this. Football is a sport where even for the very best teams, things are usually going to go wrong. Football is not a sport where you have a Mariano Rivera coming in at the very end of the game to lock things down. Football is not a sport where you could give the ball to Steph Curry, or you can give the ball to LeBron James, and over the course of 48 minutes, he's just going to carry you to the promised land. It's not a sport where things are going to go right all the time. It's a sport where things are going to go wrong a lot. And I think in this Penn State team, we saw a team that had things go wrong for them, that got themselves into a spot that hasn't always been kind to them in recent years. And it didn't matter, because this group has something special about it, Matt. There is a lot of football left to be played. They have to go to Wisconsin against a Wisconsin team that isn't great. Like, it's an all right Wisconsin team, but not, certainly not world beaters. Going to Camp Randall is always tough. They're going to have to play an Ohio State team that, for all the stick that Ohio State is getting, they lost by 1 point in one of the toughest places to play in college football. Then they're going to have to figure out what to do with the rest of the season against a schedule filled with teams that are going to bring their A-plus game against Penn State. But having said all of that, I'm going into this stretch ready. I'm going into this stretch believing that this team is going to be able to get the job done, or can get the job done, in every single one of these games.
The bye week could not come at a better time, man. I think we all need a little bit of a break and a good little reset here, because you look around the Big Ten, it's anybody's game. Like, there, as long as a one-loss team, no matter how you slice it, is going to end up in that Big Ten title game. Just make it as far as you can with it before taking that loss, and let's see what happens. So, really good football in the Big Ten all weekend, I thought.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. Boy, I feel pretty bad for Will. Do you feel bad for Will Howard? Just out of curiosity.
Feel bad for Will Howard? Yes. I think Ohio State fans are fundamentally broken in that I mean, that came across worse than I thought it would. But like, when you have that level of success and you expect that level of success, you cannot think rationally about how you view your team. This was their quote unquote window. At the same time, be better, figure it out, win your games. I feel bad for Will Howard. That's tough. Going down like that is
Yeah,
tough. But Ryan Day,
28.
Honestly, if it were up to me, if I were Ohio State's boosters, I would simply have more money for NIL and recruit better players. But that's just me.
Yeah, 28 for 35, 326 yards, 2 touchdowns, a touchdown on the ground, and all anyone's going to remember is that he like slid a second too late. It's just not a fun place to be. Although I'll tell you this, I have errands to run tomorrow, Matt. I'm very excited to listen to sports talk radio in the place where I live.
It's going to be great
because it was after one of the Michigan games a few years ago, which is the first time I ever did this. And it was one of the all-time great examples of someone setting up to a butt in history where they goes, listen, Jim Knowles knows more about football than I ever will. But, and I saw it coming from a mile away, and it's just like, oh, it hit so good. And I can't wait to do that again this week. But Oregon is now, that Penn State game against Ohio State is really interesting. We'll obviously talk about that in a few weeks because we're at a point where we've never gone into that game where Ohio State is the team that has to win it. Penn State has to win it for narrative reasons. Ohio State is the one that has to win it for like playoff and Big Ten chance. So I'm very interested in how that game's going to go, but we'll talk about that down the road. Matt, any final thoughts before we send the people off to the
Enjoy
week?
the bye week. If you traveled out to LA, travel safe, get back safe. And I'm going to be in Fort Lauderdale for a bachelor party during Penn State, Wisconsin. So I am very curious to watch that game and not act like a maniac, considering I just acted like a maniac watching the game at home by myself yesterday.
Yeah.
So it'll be fun. Enjoy the bye week. We'll probably have an episode later on in the week. Maybe just like a 10,000 foot view at where things are trending. But enjoy it. Like this is the home stretch here now. This is 6 games to close out the regular season against a Wisconsin team that I think is really good on the road, a top 5 team in the country, the reigning national runner-up, a Minnesota team that I think is better than their record would imply, and then 2 really, 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 really bad programs in Purdue and Maryland. So enjoy this next 4-week stretch because it's going to be a fascinating one.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll be here to talk about Penn State and other things over that stretch. But for now, thank you as always for listening to this edition of Roar Lions Roar. Again, please go wherever you go to get your podcast, subscribe. If you use Apple Podcasts, go leave us a 5-star review. Use Spotify, go leave us 5 stars over there. Leave comments, do whatever you have to do there. Speaking of leaving comments, head on over to YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, hop in the comments over there, talk about Penn State football with whoever shows up in the comment section over there. Give us a follow on Twitter at RLR Blog. And of course, thank you again to Home Field Apparel, our sponsor, for sponsoring this podcast, sponsoring every edition of the podcast. Use the promo code RLR24 for 15% off of your first order. One last time, thank you everyone for listening to this edition of Roar Lions Roar. For Matt Filipovitz, I'm Bill DeFilippo. Take care, everyone.
Bear down, Chicago Bears.